Tonight, before you go to bed, you're going to pick up a plastic stick with nylon bristles on the end of it and rub it against your teeth for about 2 minutes. You won't think about it. Nobody does. But for almost all of human history, that stick didn't exist. Neither did the tube beside it. Neither did the chair, or the drill, or the man in the mask who tells you to open wider. For over 300,000 years, every single one of your ancestors lived and died with the teeth they were born with, and no one to call when something went wrong. And something did go wrong. An abscess in your jaw is a pocket of infection sitting inches from your brain. Left alone, it doesn't just hurt, it kills you. So what did they actually do when a tooth started to hurt? The answer is stranger than they suffered. It changes what you think about farming. It changes what you think about sugar, and it changes whose teeth you think were better, theirs or yours. Let's start with the pain, because the pain is what drove everything else. The oldest written explanation for a toothache is about 7,000 years old, and it is a monster story. On a clay tablet from Mesopotamia, a worm goes before the gods and asks to be given a home. Not in the fruit, not in the fig. It asks to live inside the gum of a man and to drink his blood there. What worm stayed in the human imagination for 6,000 years? Doctors in Rome looked for it. Physicians in medieval England looked for it. There is no worm. There never was. But if you have ever felt a tooth pulse in the dark, you understand exactly why somebody decided a living thing must be in there, eating. So they fought the worm. They packed the hole with clove, which numbs a gum on contact and still sits in dental surgeries today under the name eugenol. They chewed willow bark, which carries the compound aspirin was built from. They rinsed with wine, with vinegar, with urine. They held a hot iron to the gum. And when none of it worked, somebody stronger held the patient down, and the tooth came out. That was the ceiling of care for thousands of years. Numb it, burn it, or pull it. Except that isn't where it starts. It starts 4,000 years earlier, and it starts with a drill. In 2006, a team led by the anthropologist Alessandro Coppa published a finding in the journal Nature. At a Neolithic burial ground called Mehrgarh in what is now Pakistan, they had been examining teeth from graves between 7,000 and 9,000 years old. 11 of those teeth had holes in them. Not decay, holes, round, deliberate, with concentric ridges running around the inside. Somebody had drilled them. The tool was almost certainly a flint point spun with a bow, the same rig those people used to drill beads. It would have taken under a minute. There was no anesthetic. There was nothing to give you except something to bite on. And here is the part that ought to stop you. Some of those drilled teeth show wear over the drill marks. The wear means the person kept eating. The person lived. This was not a burial ritual or a mutilation. It was treatment. It worked well enough to come back for, and it is 9,000 years old. 2,500 years later, in a cave in what is now Slovenia, somebody's canine cracked from the crown down into the root. The crack was packed with beeswax. That jaw is 6,500 years old, and it is the oldest filling anyone has ever found. But none of that is the surprising part. You have been assuming that ancient humans lost this fight, that their mouths were ruined and yours is fine because you have fluoride and they had a worm story. That is backwards. Look at what the skulls actually say. In one large study of Neolithic populations in China, researchers counted cavities across groups that ate in 3 different ways. The foragers, people who hunted and gathered, had cavities in about 27% of individuals and in 3% of their teeth. The rice farmers were worse, 36% of individuals, 5% of teeth. Then the millet farmers. They lived packed together and ate almost nothing but grain, 76% of individuals, 14% of teeth. Same species, same continent. The rot tracks the food, not the century. That pattern holds nearly everywhere anyone has looked. The further back you go toward hunting and gathering, the cleaner the teeth get. Not perfect, cleaner. 2 things still don't fit. There is one cave where that clean story is a lie. And there is a record of the whole thing, growing on your teeth right now, that nobody thought to read for 200 years. So what were the foragers doing right? Nothing. They weren't brushing. They had no floss, no paste, no fluoride, no idea that bacteria existed. They were doing exactly one thing differently, and they weren't even choosing it. They were eating food that didn't feed the bacteria that rot teeth. Meat doesn't, fat doesn't, leaves, roots, and gristle don't. What feeds those bacteria is sugar, and the fast collapsing starch in grain that turns into sugar in your mouth before you have finished chewing. Now, here is where the tidy version falls apart. In 2014, Louise Humphrey and colleagues published a study in PNAs on a cave in Morocco called Teforalt. The people buried there were hunter-gatherers. They farmed nothing, and more than half of their teeth were rotten. They had found wild acorns, and they ate them in bulk, and acorns are packed with starch. So it was never about farming. Farming was just the first time humans made a starchy food available every single day, on purpose, for everyone. Anybody who found one earlier got the same mouth, which brings us to the proof, and it is sitting in your mouth right now. Every day, a thin film of bacteria on your teeth hardens into a mineral crust. Dentists scrape it off and throw it away. On a skull, nobody scrapes it, so it just sits there, a sealed archive of the bacteria that lived in a person's mouth and the food they were eating on the day they died. In 2013, a team including Christina Adler sequenced that hardened plaque from skeletons spanning thousands of years. They found the community of bacteria in the human mouth did not drift gradually. It lurched twice. The first lurch is farming. The second is the Industrial Revolution, the moment refined flour and cheap sugar arrived. After that second shift, the mouth becomes markedly less diverse, and the species that dominate it are the ones that cause decay. Your mouth is not the ancestral human mouth. It is the post-1850 model, and it was rebuilt by a factory. So what finally broke it? Sugar. For most of history, sugar was a medicine sold by the spoonful. Then Europe put it on plantations, and the price collapsed. In Britain, sugar consumption per person rose roughly 20-fold across the 18th and 19th centuries. Elizabeth I's teeth famously went black. Foreign visitors wrote it down, and the profession grew to meet the damage. In 1728, a Frenchman named Pierre Fauchard published the first real textbook of dentistry and stated plainly that sugar rotted teeth. In 1844, a dentist named Horace Wells watched a man on nitrous oxide gash his leg and feel nothing, and had his own tooth pulled the next day to test it. In 1945, Grand Rapids, Michigan became the first city on Earth to put fluoride in its water. 9,000 years from a flint drill to a fluoridated reservoir, and almost all of the movement happens after we changed what we ate. There's a fossil of this in a word you already use. Your back teeth are called molars, from the Latin mola, a millstone. We named the teeth after the machine that grinds grain. Then we fed them grain, and they dissolved. But here's what it costs you. Your enamel is the hardest substance your body makes, and it is the only major tissue you have that cannot repair itself. Bone knits, skin closes, enamel is laid down before the tooth erupts, and never again. Every cavity you have ever had is still a hole. It is just a hole with a filling in it. You are running a Stone Age mouth on an industrial diet, and you are covering the difference with technology, twice a day, forever. Miss it for a few weeks, and you find out how thin the cover is. Roughly 2.5 billion people are walking around right now with untreated decay in their permanent teeth. It is one of the most common diseases on Earth. It was not common when nobody farmed anything. So when somebody tells you that dentistry is one of civilization's great gifts, what if that's only half of it? What if the drill isn't the cure? What if the drill is the receipt? They pulled figs off a branch and chewed until their jaws ached. They cracked bones for the marrow. They ground grit into everything they ate and wore their teeth flat by 40, and mostly did not lose them to rot. They believed a worm was eating them from the inside, and they were wrong, and they were also 9,000 years ahead of anyone who thinks a Stone Age person just endured it. The tooth in the ground at Mehrgar has a hole in it, and it has wear on top of the hole. Somebody drilled it. And then that person got up and went back to eating. We traded their mouth for ours, and we handed them a plastic stick to make up the difference.